Rhaenyra Targaryen is the supposed revolutionary of House of the Dragon. She's the first child of King Viserys and his only child with his first wife, Aemma Arryn. She is one of the heads of Team Black, the named heir of the late king and arguably rightful ruler of Westeros. She's a mother, a dragon rider, a queen. But does that truly make her a ruler? As always, spoilers beware, and let's get into the video. I apologize if this comes off as more of a rant to start with, but I cannot stand how people view Rhaenyra as this paragon of righteousness who does absolutely no wrong. This is not a video to bash Rhaenyra in any way, I promise, but I just had to make it clear. Rhaenyra is not perfect, and I know that has to be a shock for a lot of you diehard Team Black fans out there, and I'm sure because I won't exclusively sing her praises here, some of you will call me a biased and obvious Team Green stan, though I'm more aligned with Team Chaos, watching both sides fall apart because one side is not truly good nor the other truly evil, but everyone has their own opinions. Despite House of the Dragon being a multi-layered conflict with multiple main characters, Rhaenyra is the main character of the show. The first season practically starts and ends with her, and within the first and last episodes they make it clear that Rhaenyra has the odds stacked against her, with her being named heir and all these powerful men begrudgingly accepting, and then with her father dying, her throne being taken from her by her brother and former best friend, then the loss of not one but two of her children within days if not hours of each other, a tragedy that no mother should ever have to endure. But if she wants the throne, she must. From a young age, Rhaenyra had always been a rebellious girl, somewhat challenging the norms of the world she grew up in, kinda like Arya Stark in Game of Thrones. In her younger years, Rhaenyra didn't quite seem to care about being princess. She tells Alicent that she wants to fly around the world with her and only eat cake. She tells her mother she'd rather be a knight and ride in a battle for glory than just push out babies for some man. These are only childish fantasies though, and I would argue kind of delusional. And before you hit the dislike button, just let me explain, please. This is a fault that continues throughout the story of Rhaenyra. She's out of touch with the world. She looks at these things from the perspective of a girl who's never struggled, a girl who has everything. If she goes across the sea where no one knows her name, she'll have to make one for herself, and that's easier said than done. And it's always possible she could get into an arrangement like Daemon on Pentos where they let him and his family stay if they'll support them with their dragons. But for Rhaenyra, it could still be different. People could try to marry her for her dragon blood, and that would be a problem all on its own. Then there's her claims of being a knight. Dragons are not as perfect as most believe. Dragons have been killed before by regular people. Like in Dorne, during Aegon's conquest, his first wife Rhaenys tried to take Dorne, and in return her dragon took a scorpion bolt and they both died. Scorpion bolts are those things that hit Drogon and kill Rhaegal in GOT. All it takes is for one person to get lucky. Rhaenyra is kinda like Viserys in a way, believing that things will fall into place on their own or go away if she buries the problem. But we'll talk more about that later. Rhaenyra loses her mother when she's 15 years old, after Viserys calls for a fatal C-section in order to save his son Baelon, who ends up dying anyway. This causes her relationship with her father to be strained because his efforts for a son got her mother killed. Viserys tries to make amends, to honor his late wife and his daughter by naming her heir. Things look up for them. Then 6 months later, he marries her best friend. And as I repeatedly mentioned in previous videos, this causes a lot of problems. This decision caused Rhaenyra to be disconnected with her family, something that continues into her adult life, but we'll go over that a bit later. Rhaenyra feels betrayed, and understandably so. Viserys essentially gave her the runaround when it came to him remarrying. He asked for her blessing, letting her think she meant Laena, but the whole time he meant Alicent. Then he has the nerve to look surprised when she wants nothing to do with it. Then of course she's angry with Alicent, her childhood friend. From her perspective, Viserys had no reason to choose her as his queen, but every reason to choose Laena. So something must have been going on that she didn't tell her about. Though at the time she doesn't know about Otto's schemes or Viserys telling her not to talk about it. She shuts them away and isolates herself, and once her brother Aegon is born, she thinks the world's out to get her, and that she's going to be replaced. This causes her to hold contempt for her sibling, but more on that later. At the center of young Rhaenyra's character, she just wants to be accepted by her father, like her little brother Aegon some years later. While Rhaenyra has never been neglected or abused, she still feels overlooked by Viserys in these early years. Yes, he makes her heir and keeps her close, but during those cupbearing days of hers, she was constantly reminded by her father and his counselors that the realm favors men. Even Rhaenys says it, and Rhaenyra acts like a cocky brat about it. Rhaenyra is always reminded of what she'll never be. She even says it for herself at Emma's funeral. I'll never be a son, she says. The one thing Viserys always pushed for, what her mother died for, what would truly be the realm's delight. It may seem small, but these are big things to her. At 15 years old, having lost her mom because of her father's obsession, and it's this divide between the genders that I feel makes Rhaenyra conflicted with her own. Not to say that she wants to be a man, but that she wants the same freedoms men have in this world, the same power they command. She's like Cersei. And once again, before you hit that dislike, please just let me explain. Cersei Lannister is evil, and she also has an obsession with power because of her father Tywin, the respect and fear he commands with his sheer presence alone, something she can never do because she's a woman in Westeros, forced to look pretty and produce heirs, though they all belong to Jaime. She can never wield a sword or ride into battle, hold lands and titles on her own. She must find other ways to find freedom and power, and that's through sex with her brother and her many schemes that end up with a lot of people dead. Now, Rhaenyra is not Cersei to a T, but their stories do mirror one another. Both of them are victims of a system. They both marry men they don't love, though Rhaenyra cares for Rhaenor platonically, unlike Robert and Cersei. They both have 3 bastard children, though one set was produced out of lust and the other for necessity and duty. They try to pass them off as heirs to the crown as well, even when it's abundantly clear they have no claim. They both love their children dearly and would do absolutely anything for them. And you all may not like what I have to say next. Despite her sufferings, as I said before, Rhaenyra is not a saint. She's not this paragon of justice, this revolutionary girl boss trying to change the world. No. Rhaenyra is just like everyone else, a person who fucks up. Though in contradiction to my earlier statement, when Rhaenyra fucks up, it's a royal one. Pun intended. As I said before, Rhaenyra wants for freedom like the men in Westeros. And when Daemon comes along, he seems like he'll finally provide that release she's been wanting for, that freedom to do what she pleases, until he leaves her. Then we all know what happens with Criston Cole. Rhaenyra covers it all up, of course, and then acts as if this is not some big deal. This plays into the theme of Rhaenyra being out of touch with the world and the people in it. Like in The City when she says,
"Their wants are of no consequence."
She acts as if she's the only one that matters. What happens to her matters. She draws a line between her and her subjects, and that is not good for a future ruler. People have rebelled against Targaryens before. Years before, after the death of Aegon the Conqueror, people thought his son Aenys was weak, and they didn't like Targaryen incest, so they rebelled against him. When Aenys died, they still rebelled against his brother Maegor, and he rode Balerion, a dragon larger than Vhagar. The people's opinions are important, and she acts as if they aren't. But it's the people who fight your wars, the people who hold your castles, defend you while you sleep. If the people don't like you, what's to stop them from slitting your throat when the dragons aren't around to protect you? Rhaenyra's entitlement does her no favors. Like when she goes on tour to find a husband, she insults her suitors, these men who rode miles to meet her, who would kill for just a minute of her time. Sure, some of the things she says may be true, but even as a princess, you can't just do whatever you want without consequence. These are the people that would fight for her, die for her, and she insults them, barely gives them the time of day, and thus spoils their image of her. Who's going to want to support a person who thinks they're better than them, thinks they aren't worth the time of day, and doesn't even try to pretend otherwise? And even enables the belittling of others because she finds it amusing. She lets it be known that she likes bad boys, lets this bracken pick on a Blackwood half his size, and she just laughs. Then when they fight, she decides to abandon the situation instead of resolving the conflict, like her father. And as a result, someone dies. This inability to connect with others is a fatal thing, and it isn't even the last time she does this. Criston Cole, the man she lost her virginity to, her sworn knight and protector. It's easy to just see him as this dumb brute who's angry because he didn't get the girl, but it's more than that. More than something so meager. Criston Cole has quite literally had to fight for everything he has. Nothing was just handed to him.
I know what it is to toil for what others have freely given.
His family isn't powerful. They have no connections. His white cloak was the highest honor his family ever knew, and he soiled that for her. an act that could easily have him killed, tortured, and even castrated. But Rhaenyra doesn't seem to care about that. Him engaging with her is a dangerous thing that puts them both at risk, him more so because he isn't royalty. Still, Rhaenyra pursued him despite the danger, and then had the gall to ask Criston to continue sleeping with her when it could have gotten him killed.
So you want me to be your whore? I saw my white cloak. It is the only thing I have to my fucking name. I thought if we were married, I might be able to restore it.
His grief is justified. Until this point, he's been the epitome of what a knight should be, just and honorable. Then when he slips up, he tries to make amends for the sake of that honor, for the stain he put on his family's name. And can you blame him? Multiple times in the story, Rhaenyra has let it slip that she doesn't care or is having second thoughts about being queen or heir. Then all of a sudden, she changes her mind, and everyone calls Criston a fool for thinking she'd actually marry him. If anyone's the fool, it's Rhaenyra, just assuming she could play in the mud and not get dirty. She fails to see the people outside of herself and her inner circle, not understanding that other people have lives and thoughts of their own. Like her father, she expects things to just fall into place, and that's not going to happen. She doesn't even try to understand Criston, try to support him, or apologize for putting him in this dangerous position. Just hopes he'll follow along with her. Had she approached him as a person instead of just his princess, the heir apparent, a girl who wanted to get her rocks off every now and then, and managed to come to an understanding with him, perhaps Joffrey Lonmouth wouldn't have died, and Criston wouldn't be helping the Greens right now. But as I said before, Rhaenyra is careless, and this continues well into her adulthood. Not just with other people, but with her family. Rhaenyra gives birth to 3 sons later on in the story: Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey. She's married to Laenor, but their father is Harwin Strong, also known as Breakbones, the strongest knight in the realm. It's clear they're bastards. They have no Valyrian features whatsoever aside from the dragons they end up claiming. Even with the extensive help from her father, it's not enough to stop the speculation. Having bastards is a dangerous thing, mainly for the women in Westeros, and no matter how necessary they were because Laenor wasn't getting her pregnant, she's truly walking on a tightrope just hoping not to fall. However, it's not the bastards that are the most careless decision, it's who she has them with. We don't see Rhaenyra's relationship with Harwin Strong, or how they got close enough to feel comfortable sneaking around so she can have kids, but it does beg the question as to why she chose him. Rhaenyra isn't exactly pressed for options. She's not in a scenario with people like Otto or Corlys whispering in her ear about who best to commit treason with. It's fair to say she could have her pick of anyone, even people that look like her husband. Corlys, Laenor, and Vaemond aren't the only Velaryons out there. Their house isn't teetering on extinction like the Targs. Laenor has cousins. Vaemond has kids, who may possibly come into play in a future season. I doubt they'll be happy that their uncle Corlys is supporting the man who killed their father. There were plenty of people to choose from on Driftmark. It would be nothing to make an excuse that Laenor wanted to go visit his family and secretly try to find someone who could do the deed. It would be risky, of course, but so was entering a relationship with Harwin. She'd arguably have to deal with rumors regardless of who she slept with. And if she couldn't get a Velaryon to do it, they have servants on Driftmark that have similar complexions. Worst case, you have to risk it with one of them, and if they get lucky, they'll look like Velaryons, with Rhaenyra's white hair and skin like Laenor's. Or another worst case, we get a repeat of the Strong Boys, but this time they're black with dark hair. There's also no guarantee that someone will call her out like Vaemond does, at least not openly. Most people value their lives enough to keep quiet about the advances or bastardy, which is kind of messed up when you take a moment to think about it, possibly fearing for your life because you may or may not want to sleep with the princess. It's an unintentional coercion, like with Alicent and Viserys.
You do not mention our talks to Rhaenyra, do you?
No matter how genuine her intentions are, the threat of what could happen to these people should they refuse or say anything will always be there, even if she doesn't expect it. Because, as I mentioned before in my Alicent video, the weight of the crown is a terrifying thing. Not many people are willing to openly stand up to it, unless you have nothing to lose.
Her children are bastards!
If you ask me, Vaemond was rightfully furious that these kids were going to take over Driftmark. Imagine having lands in your family for hundreds of years, multiple generations, and then being told it's all going to an adopted child who's not even related to you, one that you barely even know at that. Vaemond had nothing to lose, and he'd rather fall on his sword than see his family ruined. Perhaps if the bastardy weren't so obvious, then maybe the succession dispute wouldn't have happened, or the claims of bastardy would have been too shaky for them to take a risk on. But regardless, it happens, and another man dies because of Rhaenyra's actions. It's a dangerous game that Rhaenyra plays. She loves her children, but their claims are weak in comparison to Alicent's children, to Vaemond and his children. Yet she continues to play the game over a throne she isn't even sure she wants. Rhaenyra has a strained relationship with her family, despite being so family-oriented. People love to blame Alicent and Otto for the disconnect, but a lot of that falls on Rhaenyra if we're being honest. She's the king's first child, the eldest sibling, and as such she's supposed to set an example. But from what we see, she only seems to hold her family in contempt.
As if to the death.
Because you mean to replace me with Alicent Hightower's son, the boy you always wanted.
She doesn't even call him her brother, and doesn't even view him as one. People love to talk about how Alicent has all this misguided anger towards Rhaenyra, but let's talk about all the misguided anger Rhaenyra has towards Aegon. From the day he's born, she looks at him with jealousy, like he's competition. But he didn't ask to be born. At this point, he doesn't even know what the throne is, and even when he gets older, he could care less about it. Even with his mother berating him constantly, he's more than willing to let her have the thing, but she acts like he'll steal everything away from her. Granted, he does do that, but it wasn't his choice. As I mentioned in my Aegon video, I think Rhaenyra actually hated her brother. He was the symbol of the betrayal of the two people she loved most, what her father sought so badly for that he killed her mother, and also a rival. Not just for the throne, but for Viserys. From a young age, all she wanted was Viserys' approval, his love, appreciation, and acceptance, to be good enough. And when she's handed the throne, it's like the ultimate semblance of his love and acknowledgement. It's why she feels so angry with Aegon, because she sees him as a threat to that, even though every time she's in trouble, Daddy comes running to save her, like on Driftmark, that I mentioned repeatedly on this channel. Aemon loses his eye, and Rhaenyra doesn't even seem to care. She just goes immediately to defend her little babies, and acts as if they could do no wrong. Regardless of what caused the incident, Rhaenyra is Aemon's big sister, and yet she suggests he be tortured to find out who told him her kids were bastards.
This is the highest of treasons. Prince Aemon must be sharply questioned so we might learn where he heard such slanders.
For those who don't know, to be sharply questioned means to be tortured in Westeros. She immediately goes to defend her image with no remorse for Aemon. He's a kid too. He's her family. But he's the monster for telling the truth. She essentially says the truth is treason, but what about her? She's had 3 bastards, and bastards cannot inherit over true-born children. And she's passing them off as heirs to 2 different houses, one of which they have 0 claim to. This is where she resembles Cersei the most, defending her obvious lies, trying to make other people seem like the problem instead of her. People love to see her as the saint, this woman who could do no wrong, who just wants to protect her family, but she and Alicent are more alike than you think. Everyone loves to talk about Alicent covering for her kids, like with the Diana situation, but they act as if had this been Jace in the scenario, who assaulted a serving girl, Rhaenyra wouldn't do the exact same thing. With the length she went to defend her children to the detriment of her own family bonds, so blatantly in front of the masses as well, why wouldn't she? The people already know her kids are bastards, and bastards are seen as evil incarnate. So if the truth of something like that got out, she'd be seen as even more unfit, and it would give people more reason to rise against her. Rhaenyra loves to complain about the box she's in, but she's the one who put herself in it. Say what you will about the patriarchal system of Westeros, there are still ways to navigate it, but Rhaenyra makes things difficult for herself. By having such obvious bastards, she puts her image into question, and when that happens, she doesn't even try to restore it. She just runs to Viserys, or off to Dragonstone, then is surprised that nothing is the same when she comes back home. She and Daemon complain about the Hightower takeover, and yet they're the ones who decided to stay away from court for years, away from Viserys. They handed them control on a silver platter, then after years away having done absolutely nothing, asked this dying man to defend them one last time when they've been nothing but political headaches to him his entire reign.
So I can be a remedy for your political headaches.
You are my political headache.
And yet he still supports them. She acts like her father, thinking that if she just buries her head in the sand, it'll all go away. And that's not going to happen. Just ask Lord Boros. When Aegon takes the throne, she expects him to just follow her orders because his father swore fealty to her years ago. But Otto says it best.
Stale oaths will not put you on the Iron Throne, Princess.
Half the people who swore to her years ago are dead, and she expects to hold their families to things they didn't even say themselves. And for all of her efforts to keep her secret of bastardy, she's done nothing to truly help her image in the eyes of the people, like Alicent does with Aegon.
They crowned him before the masses.
It would be a shame that even if Rhaenyra did become queen, no one supported her because she didn't try to change her narrative like the Greens do. Once again, Rhaenyra is ignorant to the people. She's kinda like Daenerys and Viserys in Game of Thrones. At some point, they both just expect people to fall on their knees and obey them because they're the rightful heirs, or because they have dragons. Well, you have to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk. Power is something earned, not given. Just because you wear a crown doesn't make you a ruler. You could have all the power in the world, but without the people on your side, it's useless. Rhaenyra is not a revolutionary. This whole bid for the throne isn't political, it's personal, especially after the death of her son. She's not fighting for the equality of women. She's not fighting to break the wheel. Hell, she's not even fighting for Aegon's prophecy. She's fighting for the throne that was promised to her. She's fighting for revenge. Anything else comes in second. But people still see her as a symbol, an icon, when she's just a person. This conflict isn't about man versus woman like Otto would have you think. Not even Alicent cares about gender. Hell, she's on board with Rhaenyra being queen and vehemently refused to petition for Aegon until Rhaenyra showed a less favorable side of herself. Rhaenyra may be the protagonist, but she is by no means a hero. No one in this story is, no matter how you try to frame it.